Hey there, my name's Andy Miller, and today we're working with knives and fire. I'm going to show you some basic knife skills and techniques that'll help protect your hands. We're going to talk about some basic ways to cut up produce like pepper and onions. Then we're going to talk about a couple simple ways to cook an egg and finish it all off with a great recipe for a basic omelet. For this project, you'll want a medium to large cutting board, a chef knife, a small towel, an onion, a pepper, eggs in a mixing bowl, a pan with a lid, a spatula, cooking spray and butter, and finally a plate and a fork. So now that you have all your supplies together, first things first, we've got to wash our hands. Let's get down to some cutting basics. Now there's three components we're going to consider today when cutting up vegetables. The first one is your cutting board. The second is your knife. And the third is your hands. So first, the cutting board. Now sometimes a cutting board can get a little wobbly or it can slide around on the countertop. So a simple trick to that is just to take a washcloth. We're going to go over and get it just a little damp. And then we're just going to set it underneath the cutting board flat so it creates a pad to keep the cutting board in place. Next we have the knife. Now I'm going to show you some basic ways to hold a knife, to handle a knife, and then some basic vegetable cuts later. But first and foremost, knives are dangerous. Cuts and accidents can happen. So before ever starting on a cutting project, make sure you at least know where the Band-Aids are in your house. Tip number one, a dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife. Seems a little backwards, but the fact of the matter is a sharp knife is going to cut properly through your vegetable or through your item, and a dull knife is going to have a hard time. So you're going to want to try and overcompensate by really sawing or jabbing into it. Don't do either of those things. And last but not least, your hands. What should they do? Well, first thing is you're going to want to take your dominant hand, mine's my right, and you're going to want to form a pinch between your thumb and your index finger. And you're essentially going to pinch right at the point of the blade where it meets the butt or the handle of the knife. So you're going to hold the knife, and then you're going to take the remaining three fingers and you're going to wrap it around the handle. When it comes to your non-dominant hand, that's going to be the hand that's holding the food. So this is the hand that we want to make sure we're not cutting off. So the best way to do that is to start by taking your fingers, and instead of pushing them all the way out, you actually want to roll and tuck your fingers in. That way your first and second knuckle are creating a flat surface with your fingertips tucked underneath. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us a barrier to guide the side of the blade no further than where our knuckle is keeping it in place. And your fingers are safely tucked underneath. So first, we're going to start with your basic white onion. We're going to take and cut the ends off. And then we're just going to cut it right in half. And this makes it really easy to get the outer layer of the onion and peel it off. So whenever you're cutting something, you want to make sure to have the flattest surface possible on the cutting board to prevent any wobbling and to make sure that your knife doesn't slip while you're cutting. So to cut an onion, we're going to do a really simple julienne cut, which is also known as a matchstick cut. And that's where we have these super thin strips of onion that we have a lot of different application for. So we're going to hold the knife, like we talked about, and tuck your fingers in on top of the onion. And then starting by angling your knife, think of the onion as a round, and you want to aim for the center point. So we're going to angle our knife towards the center, and we're just going to slide forward and back. And what that gives us is this nice little thin slice. Now working your way up, you want to just press in and back, in and back, in and back, until you get closer to where your fingers are at the top. Now as you cut, you want to just give your fingers a little slide over to make sure that you're not hitting your fingertips. And you're just going to keep working around the arc of the onion until you're about halfway through. Now that gives us this nice sliced up onion that we can then use, we're going to use later for the omelet. Instead of trying to work around the rest of the onion this way, you're actually going to want to turn it and rotate it on its side, and then just repeat the process again. Now let's move on to breaking down a simple bell pepper. What I like to do is start by cutting off the top and the bottom. And that gives you a nice opening to the inside of the pepper. So we want to kind of clean this out. And a real easy way to do that is to start at one side, just slice right down, and then turn it on its side and give a very careful slice with your knife as you roll the pepper open. So remember, we're keeping our non-dominant hand that's holding the food, we're going to keep those fingertips tucked in and create a wall that your knife can't move beyond. And then you're going to set the point down on the table, on the cutting board, and you're just going to push and slice down. And move over. For a matchstick, we want about 1/8 of an inch, but it's really up to your preference. And slice down again. Again, you're going to start with the tip and you're going to push into the cutting board, and you're going to move the knife slowly down the pepper. Every time inching your fingers a little more back. You can push it forward if you need. But you're just going to work through the pepper all the way down, getting those nice thin slices. Since we talked about the julienne, let's talk about one more common way of cutting a vegetable. You're going to start with essentially the same process. Just nice little slices, about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch wide. Don't have to be quite as thin as we did with the julienne, but you don't want them to be too big. Just going to cut that all the way down. Next, we're going to take that pile, we're going to turn it 90 degrees, we're going to stack it up a little bit, and then we're going to run our knife the other way across it to get a nice dice to it. So we're just going to run through and get those nice small dices. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did with the onion. We're going to do some nice small slices. Then we're going to rotate it, tuck your fingers in, and chop the other direction to get a nice dice. Now that we've worked through our vegetables and a little knife basics, let's get over and start working with our eggs. First things first, we gotta let our pan heat up. So we're gonna turn it on to a medium heat, and we're gonna let it warm up for just a minute. As our pan's warming up, we're gonna start by cracking our first egg. Now I find that the easiest way to crack an egg is to have a flat surface and just give it a sharp tap to create a dent in it. Then you're going to take your thumbs and break into that dent and just open it up into the bowl. Now this makes sure that if any eggshells or anything get in there, you can clean them out before they go in the pan. After a quick warm up, we're going to give our pan just a little cooking spray, and then we're going to drop our egg right into it. Now it's cooking pretty quick, which is what you want. But if you need to, you can always turn the stove down just a little bit. But you want to make sure that the whites start to cook. And because we use cooking spray, we should be able to work around the edges of this very lightly to make sure that when we go to flip it, we can turn it around. Now we're going to let this cook just a minute since this part of the white is already cooking through. Now what we want is this kind of thicker, translucent part of the white to start to cook before we give it a flip. Now that this is starting to cook through all the way, we're going to shuffle our spatula and give it a nice push. And then flip it and let it sit. Now the way you can check for this, after you had flipped it and wait a couple seconds, you can give a light push on the yolk. See how that springs back? That lets you know that the yolk inside is still running. Now if you want an over easy egg, this is the time you want to pull it. So you're just going to take again with your spatula, work around the edges, and pop it onto a plate. Just a little bit of kosher salt, and some cracked pepper, and you've got a perfectly runny, yolked, over easy egg. Now for method number 2. This one's going to be just a little bit simpler, but we're going to add one extra ingredient, and that's water. So we're going to start the same way with a medium heat on the pan, and we're going to let that warm up for a minute. Meanwhile, we're going to go back and we're going to crack another egg into our small dish. The thing that's going to make this different is that we're going to use a little bit of water in the pan, and then we're actually going to cover it with a lid, allowing all the steam inside to cook the egg without actually having to flip it over. So like before, we're going to start with a little spray to keep it from sticking, and then we're going to lower our egg in. Now it helps to shake the pan a little bit to keep it loose, but then almost right away when the eggs start to go, you're going to want to add in the water and cover it with a lid. Now you can see the eggs start to cook much quicker right away. And what we're looking for is just that little bit of white covering on top of the yolk. Pull the lid off. Slide your spatula around. Ooh. Give it a nice push. And there you have a nice simple egg with another runny yolk. Now again, if you want a yolk that's a little bit firmer or even hard, you're going to leave the egg in for an extra 2 to 4 minutes. And now, last but not least, the omelet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by cracking 2 eggs into a bowl. And take a fork and whisk them together. Tight. So now that we have our mixed eggs, we're going to take the vegetables that we cut up earlier, and we're going to take everything over to the stove. So you can use any ingredients you want for your omelet, but today we're going to use the pepper and onions that we cut up earlier. So we're going to start by turning our oven on to a medium heat, and we're going to let that warm up for just a little bit. Now that our pan's started to warm up a little bit, we're going to add just a bit of butter. You can use a canola oil or a coconut oil or even olive oil if you like, but well, with breakfast food I just prefer butter. So you're going to let that melt down just a little bit, and then you're going to take a nice handful of our pepper and onions, and we're going to toss those in the pan. And as it cooks, we're just going to take the spatula and give them a little stir occasionally. This will help break up the onions from each other and to make sure that everything is getting a nice even cook. And what you're looking for is for your onions to start to turn a little translucent and for a little browning color to get on them. Get that transferred into a bowl. And now we're ready to make our omelet. So an omelet's going to cook really quick, so you want to make sure you have everything you need right at your station. So we've got our eggs that we already whisked, the pepper and onion that we're going to put inside, and we have our pan, which we're going to warm up a little lower than medium. You actually want to cook the omelet a little lower because it's going to end up being pretty thin. And then for omelets, I like to use butter. The reason for this is that butter is going to melt and it's going to start to bubble, and that bubbling is going to let us know when our pan is actually warm enough to add the eggs. So our butter is going to act almost like a little thermometer to let us know when the pan's ready. And we're going to take and just give another quick whisk to our eggs and pour them in. Now you can already start to see the edges get lighter in color, and that means it's starting to cook. We're going to check the edges with the spatula, and we can see, oh yeah, look at that, it's already working. Alright, see how quick that worked? So now we're going to take in the upper part, we're going to add in some of our toppings. Now the trick with an omelet is to not overstuff it. And then heck, why not add just a little bit of cheese in there? Okay. Now it's essentially cooked all the way that we need, so we're going to start rolling it now. Now what I like to do here is push it forward in the pan to give me a little space to slide my spatula. And then we're just going to give it a nice half fold over. And then if we did everything right, Slides right out onto the pan, onto the plate. And then we're just going to finish our omelet off with a little bit of the diced onion and pepper that we cut up earlier.